This is, I want to recognize, obviously, Senator Whitehouse is here with me, Janet Coit, DEM. We also have representatives from Congressman Landry, Congressman Cicilline's office. I particularly want to thank Chris Brobuck and John Knight for their hospitality and Fred Matera for helping organize this issue. Fishing is one of the most challenging, demanding, and outright dangerous businesses there is. It has been a mainstay of the Rhode Island economy throughout my entire life. In fact, I can remember coming over here to Galilee in the 50s and 60s for the tuna derbies, which now you can't have a tuna derby because you don't have that kind of stock. It's a hugely important part of our economy. We've got estimate about $200 million of economic activity at least being generated by the fishing community. And we know we've been in a series of crises going back several decades because of issues of the fishing stocks, rules with respect to taking out the fish. We also anticipate, as you've very blunt, about additional proposed restrictions that are coming out for the New England fisheries. I mean, one of the other aspects of our operation, particularly talking to the captains on the docks, is that we operate out of Galilee up to the Gulf of Maine all the way down into the North Carolina and beyond. And so some of the restrictions that will be specific to New England won't affect all the operations out of here, Galilee, but it does significantly impact the ability of the fishing industry to survive. I mean, this is a question in many respects of survival. We also have here a very vibrant lobster industry, and we've talked to NIMS about being much more responsive to our lobster fishing operations than they have in the past. But we are here very sincerely and very honestly to, one, have an opportunity to talk to the individuals, John Bullitt and Dr. Karp, who are directly connected to the fishing policies that are valid for NIPS. We've got our state head of environmental activities, who's also here. I don't think anyone in this room believes there's an easy answer. And one of the issues that we have to address is not just the effect of fishing operations on the stock, but changes that might be occurring in the ocean in terms of the viability of fishing stocks, regardless of the activity of the fishing activity. You know, John and I were talking before, one of the things about fish management going back 20 years ago, there was a simple sort of a rule. It seemed to work that if you reduced activity, the stocks would come back up. Once the stocks came back up, they could start increased activity again. Now they're seeing some evidence that even by reducing activity, stocks aren't responding. And that's raising serious questions about acidification of waters, about other effects. That's going to make it even more complicated. So we're here not to say these are going to be easy issues, where they're not going to be resolved in a day or a week, but we're beginning a dialogue that's going to have to be constant over the next several years. You know that we have been supportive of efforts. We're beginning to support efforts for disaster relief assistance toward the fishing industry here in the state because of these fully anticipated problems. We've joined with our colleagues in the Senate. Governor Chafee also has sent a letter forward. That's part of an answer, but that's not the full answer. And the only way I think we're going to come to the best solution is by a constant constructive dialogue between the industry, between the regulators, and between the Congress. Let me recognize Senator Whitehouse. Also, I see Representative Teresa Tanzi's here from Narragansett. So Teresa, thank you. But Sheldon? And we're going to move forward quickly because we really want John and Dr. Karp.
Yeah, not only do I want to recognize Teresa Tanzi, but she's also the representative who got the pair trawling bill passed through the House. So thank you for your work on that, Teresa. When we heard that Mayor Bullard was the potential nominee for the Northeast Administrator position, first of all, I was very pleased. I think Jack and I were both pleased because he has a very good record as the mayor of New Bedford at facing these fishing issues head on and at making sure that the fishermen's voices were heard. And if there's one thing that I have taken from my visits here to Galilee, from the times I've gone out on the trawlers and on the lobster boats and others, it's that there is huge skepticism about the extent to which NOAA is actually listening to the Rhode Island fishing community. And I think it's really important that John be here. So as soon as we found out that he was the nominee, the first thing we wanted to do was to make sure he committed to coming here to Galilee to listen to all of you and to try to work through some of what appear to be problems of common sense that aren't being worked out right now in a sensible way. So I'm really delighted that he is here. As you all know, we've got a lot of work to do to bring more common sense to the way in which the fisheries are managed, and we look forward to working with all of you on that, but I don't want to take time away from John. He's the guy you came to see. So without further ado, John Bullitt.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be back in Point Judith, and I am especially honored to be here with Senator Reed and Senator Whitehouse. And all of you, and thank you, John, for making Superior Trawl available to us. This is a difficult task, trying to figure out how we get the regulation of fisheries right. I took this job about a month ago on August 6th, so I was hoping sometime about now they'd teach me how to make fish, and this would be an easier job, but maybe that'll come in the second month. It hasn't come yet, so it remains a difficult task. As has been mentioned, I was mayor of New Bedford in the late 1900s, and it's a fishing port you may be familiar with. And when I was mayor, I did work with the fishing industry, and I know how important the fishing industry is to a community. And it's not just about the jobs; it's about the soul of a seaport. And seaports have many similarities, big and small, up and down the coast. You walk along one dock in a seaport, you walk along another dock, it's the same. And so we have to protect that. It's important to America. And again, it goes beyond jobs. When fish plants turn into condos, two things. They never turn back into fish processing plants. You lose something that's very important. So my definition, with the National Marine Fisheries Service, my definition of fisheries is not complicated. Fisheries are fish and fishermen. Fish and fishermen. We need them both. Any day we wake up and we don't have both fish and fishermen, it's time to go home. All right? So that's what we have to make sure. We got fish and fishermen every day. And some days, we're hanging on by our fingernails. So our challenge, Dr. Bill Karp, mine, yours, elected officials, is how do we make sure every day we've got fish and fishermen? So the decisions we have to make, none of them easy, are how do we make sure we've got fish and fishermen every day? And so we do have some difficult decisions on how to do that, because it is more complicated. It used to be one-dimensional. Overfishing was the problem, and so now it's more difficult. I learned, I worked at NOAA in the mid-1900s, and I thought we had a difficult challenge, in the mid-90s. I thought we had a crisis then, and there was a disaster declared, and there was disaster assistance, and I spent a lot of time in seaports from Cape May to Ellsworth in meetings like this, trying to figure out what was the best way, how serious was the problem, who was affected, and what were the needs. And we came up with 11 needs, from health insurance to overcapacity to how to get into different fisheries. And we worked very closely with Congress and with the industry to figure out how to administer wisely assistance to fishing communities. And one of the things I learned was that fishermen are very smart. It seems like that should be obvious to you guys, but you know, there are a lot of people in government where maybe that isn't so obvious. So I've spent a lot of time in my first month in meetings like this going out to listen to very smart people say, this is what the problem is, and this is what we think you should pay attention to. Because fishing is complicated. You all know that. You know it a lot better than I do. I'm in my 5th or 6th week. You'll always know it a lot better than I do. And so I'm here to listen to you tell me what I should be paying attention to. I want to hear it in your place of business, in your words. What should I be paying attention to? All right, that's what I'm here for. In the meetings I've had so far, a lot of people have told me that one of the problems is how we do the science. So I'm not a scientist, all right? Bill Carr is a really good scientist, and he's come here from Alaska, and he's got a really good reputation for listening to fishermen and working very well with fishermen in the state of Alaska. And he's got Russ Brown, who's also really good. So he's here if you want to talk about that, right? But so I want to hear in your own words, what are the issues that I should be paying attention to on fisheries in this part, you know, in Point Judith. So we'll take notes on that. Allison McHale from my office is here, and she'll be taking notes on that. Now, one of the things in the 90s that we did was we also worked very closely with members of Congress to put together a disaster relief. Senator Reed was in Congress, the only member of the Rhode Island delegation at the time who was there. And it's one of the things that is harder nowadays, Senator Reed. You might reflect back on those times. Bipartisanship was easier back then. It's a harder environment now to get things done. It's harder to find money nowadays. But fishing issues nowadays, I think if any issue can get bipartisan support, I think fishing may be it. But we work very carefully and closely with members of Congress. We will do that again. We will reach out and work with members of Congress and their staff to see how we can address needs. But we want to hear from you as to what those needs are. Those needs might be addressed with financial assistance if we can find ways to provide that, working with Congress. Those needs might be addressed with the way we manage fisheries. There are some abundant fisheries. There are some that are not abundant, right? So that's what I want to hear from you. So I would hope that you'd let me know what you think we're doing well, if you think we're doing anything well, where you think we can do things better. And it would be helpful to me if you would tell me who you are and what your business is. We'll take that information down, so when I come back, I'll be able to remember who you are. We'll post on our web what issues were raised. We won't post your name, you know, we'll keep that confidential, it'll be for my benefit. But we do want to post for the benefit of other people what issues were raised in Point Judith, all right? So if you wouldn't mind giving your name, that'd be helpful to me. All right, now, does that cover it, or do you want to say?
I just, 2 points. One is, we've got Lieutenant Coit from the DEM here, and Joan Moran from the SBA. Joan, because the one resource that we don't often take advantage of enough, I think in the fishing community, is the Small Business Administration. Because you're all small businessmen and women as well as fishermen and fisherwomen. The other thing too is, and John said it, when he comes back next, the point is not, you know, listening and then going away. The point is getting constructive criticism, getting specific proposals, evaluating them, and then come on back and tell you this is exactly, when you said this, we evaluated it, here's our conclusion. So this is just the first in a process to try, as John said, to get the best information we can so they can make the best decisions they can. The first level is administratively. The scientists and the administrators working directly with the fishing community. Related to that, of course, is Congress. We are working very hard to try to put in place a disaster relief program like we did in the 90s. But John also pointed out it's much more complicated now for some obvious reasons, but that's not going to stop us. So we're working 2 tracks. But if this can be a sort of specific, here's a proposal, here's an idea, here's what you're doing wrong, you're not measuring it properly, this industry is not being appropriately managed, etc., that would be immensely helpful to us. And then the second round is when we come back as quickly as possible with John and Dr. Carp and his colleagues and say, point by point, here's the response. John has to depart at 10:30, so I'm going to
we got time.
You got time, 10:30. Yeah. We're going to have to depart about 10 o'clock. We have to go around the hospital for something else, but I just want to let everybody know that. Yeah. So I think the best point of contact is let John proceed.
Let me also, I want to introduce Dr. Bill Carp, but just as one example, in the 90s, one of the issues, one of 11 issues, was overcapacity of the fleet. And one of the things we did, just as an example, was to design, fishermen came up with there's too many boats chasing too few fish for various reasons, and a vessel buyout program was designed by fishermen. The primary leader of that was Jim O'Malley. How many people remember Jim O'Malley? Or should I say Jim O'Malley, right? You guys remember him, right? So the point is, these ideas came from fishermen, and that's why I'm back here. Jim McCauley and Jake Dykstra, many from this port. Fred Matera is here. Good to see you, Fred. I haven't seen you in a while. So I do want to introduce Dr. Bill Carp, who's in his first week of official permanent status here. So, Bill, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, please.
Then we'll start listening to you guys, the important people.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you, Senator Reed and Senator Whitehouse, for this opportunity. It's really great to see so many people here, and that actually speaks to me very loudly about your interests and your concerns. And I don't want to take a lot of time because, as John has said, we're here to listen, but I just want to give you a few initial thoughts. I was in acting capacity as director for the first 6 months of the year, and I did get the opportunity to meet a number of you during that time, so it's good to see you again. But most of you I haven't met before, but I look forward to getting to know and to interacting with in the coming months and years. It's clear that there are some major crises in fisheries of this part of the country. As John said, not all of the stocks are in bad shape, but some of them are, and those that are having a very serious impact on the livelihood of many people, many of whom are in this room. It's also clear that the data, the numbers that the status of the stocks are based on come, in the most part, from the Science Center. So we're in the unfortunate position of bringing the bad news to you a lot of the time. It's equally clear that the science is often not well communicated and not well understood, and that there's a special burden on us, excuse me, at the Science Center to do a much better job at communicating our science and to making sure everybody understands what it is that we do, how we do it, and what the basis is for us providing the scientific advice. So that's something that I think we do quite well, but I think that we need to invest in improving in that area. In my years working in Alaska, and it's about 26 years that I worked at the Alaska Science Center, I've learned an awful lot from the fishing industry. Fishermen spend time on the water and observe. You know what's going on out there, in many cases, a lot better than we do. And the perspectives that you have and the language that you use may be a little bit different. But we need to figure out how to better communicate and how to learn from each other, and how we can better incorporate your observations into the science that we do. One of the things that I've been quite impressed with in the Northeast is the stock assessment process, which is more open and provides more opportunity for engagement and input from fishermen and other interested stakeholders. But clearly, that's not enough. We need to do better at that. And I've already had a few conversations just in the short time I've been here, and even here today, with fishermen who have information and ideas that they want to contribute to the process. And we need to figure out how to better listen and how to integrate that. I'm familiar with a number of the fisheries and fisheries issues of Rhode Island in particular, but not all of them, so I've got a lot to learn. And I don't want to take any more time. As I said, I want to allow more opportunity for us to hear from you. But I do want to make a commitment that I will be back and I will be available to engage with you individually or collectively, and that I will do the best that I can to bring the industry and the science closer together, and to improve our ability to understand and work through these complex issues, especially at a time, as Senator Reed mentioned, when the climate is changing, there are changes in the ecosystem, and we really need, again, together to understand what's going on out there so that we can use that knowledge to help us better manage the fisheries that are so important to all of you. Thank you.
I've done a number of these listening sessions. I don't want you to think that this is normal, okay? To have United States senators present. You guys are exceptionally well represented by Senator Whitehouse and Senator Reed. For them to show up at this is unusual. You are very well represented. Okay, I think you had your hand up first.
Yes, actually I did. In fact, obviously science is one of our biggest arguments. And for many years, we've been asking and asking and asking and asking.
Did you give your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Tina Jackson. I'm president of the American Alliance of Fishermen and Companies. We've been asking and asking and asking for better science, such as the Bigelow has been towing with a rock hopper on the back of their net. You may know what that is. Many people may know. Most everybody in this room does. And they're doing it specifically with groundfish trawl surveys. You can't catch groundfish with a rock hopper net on soft bottom. They refuse to change it over. That's part of the problem, is that whenever advice is given to the Science and Statistical Committee, they ignore it. The simple fact that people are saying there's so much yellowtail out on George's banks, they're anemic, you can't get away from them. Again, that type of information is ignored on a regular basis. How much longer do we have to wait in order for somebody to say, okay, enough with the Bigelow, because we took $54 million out of cooperative research and put it into catch shares, which everybody in this room is very well aware of. Catch shares is a failure. If we're asking for disaster relief money, obviously we've got a big problem. New Bedford had over 230 working boats. Now they're down to 30 and they're owned by one person. So obviously consolidation is a factor with this issue too. So you've got science, you've got a program that nobody wanted that's failing, and you have stock assessments that are at best extremely poor. How much longer do we have to wait before everybody in this room is out of business? Because our boat hasn't caught groundfish in the last 3 years. And that money that the states are asking for should not go to organizations to do more science. They should go specifically to the people who, number one, were put out of business, number two, who were forced to sell their business because they had no allocation. And number three, the people who were severely hurt by the Catch Share program. No more funding for specific organizations. I mean, people are really what matter here in this room, and their businesses are gone. And this state has lost hundreds of millions of dollars based on poor science, based on a poor regulatory program. Scott Lang spoke very highly of you, Mr. Bullard, so I'm going to fully expect you to take what I say to heart and to reach outside the organizations, some of the grassroots organizations like myself and Rhode Island Fishermen's Alliance, to help you along and hopefully get it done and get it done fast, because too many people are going out of business and we just can't afford it anymore.
So, that was a mouthful.
I know it was.
So, none of you can ask questions that complicated, all right? So let's break it down a little bit. The first one was about the Bigelow and
And the science, getting rid
and
of
the
that
science.
and
So
putting
do
our
you
money
want
into cooperative.
to, do you want to respond to that part of it, Bill?
Yes, let me.
You don't have to go through the whole thing, it's more of a statement that,
No, but I want, because it's great, because Bill's here, and I've heard the question on the Bigelow, so I really do want to get a response on that.
I hear you, and I hear you very loud, and we've heard this many times about concerns about the survey and how the survey informs the stock assessment. Again, as the new person at the lead of the Science Center, I take that very seriously. The first thing that we have to do is do a much, much better job at explaining what the sources of information are for the stock assessment and how the stock assessment works. We also need to look very carefully at how well the Bigelow is informing the stock assessments and at the other sources of information that are used in the process. What I need to do is take some time to better understand the dimensions of the problem. But one thing that we are going to do, and John and I have been planning this, have started planning this, is to hold a one-day session in early November in Portsmouth, Massachusetts, where we're going to...
Portsmouth.
New Hampshire, excuse me. Shows you
Not
how
Rhode Island,
familiar I am with New Hampshire. At least I didn't say Alaska. Where we're going to begin some dialogue between the scientists and the industry to better convey the scientific process, to listen more to these kinds of concerns, and from that to look at where we need to go, both to improve the communication and to open up the science. So
just take the rock hopper net off the back, put the cookie sweep on, and you'll be catching a whole hell of a lot more yellowtail. That's as simple as it can get.
fair enough.
Thank you.
Now you raised several other issues, though,
And I
besides
guess that would be
that.
more for the congressional delegation when it comes to the monies and some of the buyout monies, and you know, I will
All right,
come forth and I will talk to
Yeah.
Sheldon about where we can better serve some of
Okay.
that money if it does come through. I know time.
okay, all right. Chris, and then we'll go back.
Thank you. Christopher Brown, Commercial Fisherman of Point Judith and Brown Commercial Fishermen Association. We have a couple of systemic problems. One is the ecosystem and the other one is our management. When I say management, it goes all the way to the top. We have in play right now a mechanism that assumes all we have to do is ratchet down commercial fishing and all is solved. That notion has been driven forward by the Magnuson Act, as well as population dynamic scientists who were toast of the town back in the day. That all has to change. We only have one ecosystem to work with. That's the one out here in back of us. We need to have energetic scientists in positions of authority, making decisions, and our management body and our government structure has to embrace their new job as becoming architects and engineers of a healthy ecosystem. We have too many dogfish in the Atlantic Ocean. There is a new body of work that is going to be, is partially peer-reviewed already. Dr. James Sulikowski, that uses isotopes and, you know, places codfish and dogfish at exactly the same trophic level, which makes the success of dogfish a slam dunk and the failure of codfish a certainty. There is no level of reducing commercial pressure on codfish that will bring the population up, given the abundance of dogfish. Pop-dine scientists collectively think in the way that how much do we have to ratchet down commercial fishing? Energetic scientists would approach it and say, how many dogfish do we have to take out of the formula to pave the way for cod to come back? There is a solution in one camp of thought, there is not a solution in the other. Up until now, there has not been. We have to start looking at the new job for you guys. That's to man up, become actively engaged in managing what the ocean has to offer. You can't manage what you don't have. You can only manage what you have. We can't bring cod back until you get the dogfish out. You can't bring flounders and yellowtails back until you get the skates out. The bigelow is a part of an issue, but I'm not going to say it's as much of an issue as our reluctance to embrace a new job. We're willing to be profitable catching anything. If I got to catch dogfish to make a living, I don't care what I catch, as long as I can pay my bills. Use the fleet as a tool to statically rebalance the ecosystem. Give us a chance to survive. You don't have to keep knocking us down and knocking us out to a point where our infrastructure collapses. We need in this harbor 2 or 3 net places, 2 or 3 fuel places, 2 or 3 insurance companies. We can't get by with one. New Bedford can't get by with one. There are better solutions if we are willing to change our job description a little bit on your end and on our end as well. So I would actively encourage you to get about the business of getting away from single species management and wrap your minds around ecosystem engineering and put some of the young, smart people to work at the scientific level that can help us. Thank you.
You want to respond? Just very briefly, I think this whole issue of looking at and better integrating different aspects of the ecosystem and the management advice that we give is really crucial. And we do have a group of very bright, in some cases young, in some cases not so young scientists who are focusing on that area. And we are working with both councils, the New England Council and the Mid-Atlantic Council, on developing and over time implementing integrated ecosystem assessments and providing that kind of advice. There are complex challenges, but you're absolutely right that we have to look at the whole ecosystem and the way that these species interact and the way that the physical factors affect the productivity of the individual stocks. So yes.
The dogfish crisis is the linchpin for a disaster declaration in New England. It was a man-made disaster. We empowered 1930s and 40s information about dogfish, drove it home with the well-intentioned Magnuson Act, and as a result, we have protected them to a point. Now they are proliferated, and we are hamstrung by our ability to grow anything back. We can't get there from here. We need your help. We need you to embrace Dr. Sulikowski's work. Have him come to your office and give a presentation. The science is tragically flawed on 5 or 6 different levels. He is going to demonstrate that there are 3 times as many dogfish in the ocean as is previously thought. Their diet is 85% bony fish. They compete at the exact same trophic level as cod, and that we have underestimated when they spawn, how they spawn, the age at which they spawn, gestation period. Everything we knew about dogfish is wrong. We cannot get there. It's a man-made disaster. We did it, and that should be the foundation of a declaration of disaster in New England. And we need to keep the fleet alive until we can set about the business of eradicating those things for our profit. They were just put on the list of fish that are much more politically correct to catch. That should open doors and markets. We need to be able to take them out of the ocean for money.
I would say, add one thing for the benefit of the senators, and that is 2 things. One, the quotas on dogfish have been going up, maybe not as fast as you want them, but they have been going up. And secondly, at every other listening session, I have heard remarkably the same comments as you have been making. So this is an issue you are not alone in raising. You are also said very quickly, but I noted it, that the same thing applies with skate in its relationship. Would you just elaborate
Yeah.
in its relationship with
As
flounder?
an example of the abundance of skates, we have 3 or 4 vessels that target skates in and around Block Island. Annually, they take 5 to 6 million pounds of skates out of an area 3 miles, 3 to 4 miles around the island. They never drop off. The bottom is clearly paved. They compete at the same trophic level as with yellowtails and flounder. You can have one or you can have the other, but when one takes a foothold and there is no balance, then you have a real problem bringing the other back. You can't have them both. And that will be probably our next funding request, will be to do a study on the relationship between those species. It's stuff that fishermen have long said, but we have not taken the time to scientifically demonstrate what we know. So now we have to change what you know in order to win the day here.
I'm going to shoot back and forth, back here, and then we'll go back to it. Yeah.
My name is Caroline Karp, no relationship to Dr. Karp, and I'm a scientist and a lawyer. And I've worked with a lot of people in this room for a long time, and I have a couple of comments. And the first is, in my opinion, the problem is not as simple as fish and fishermen, and it's a terrible mistake to simplify it to that equation. The problem is actually fish in an ecosystem that live in a context of commercially harvested animals, non-commercial animals, and the habitat they depend on. So you can't simplify that into the equation. And at this side, it's not just fishermen, it's the communities in which they live, which include lots of complicated industries, but secondary, tertiary businesses, they have a voice in this, as well as the people who actually care about the longevity, the survival of the fish. So to simplify that, I consider that to be just a terrible mistake. And I want to also respond to something that Chris said very quickly, and that is the dogfish problem is a man-made problem. It's a man-made problem because we overfished the animals that were there first and allowed dogfish to invade this empty habitat. And I think to the extent anybody out of NOAA starts saying that they're going to sacrifice science in order to have a good dialogue about information, I think that's tragic. And I hope the agency doesn't get politicized so that we all decide we're going to debate science. I truly hope that, and I'm concerned about that.
Elaborate on that.
Yes, I will elaborate on that. There really is something about collecting data and doing it in a reproducible way, so people get trained to do this. You reproduce it, and then you look at it over time to see whether or not there's a trend and whether that pattern is reproducible. That's real information. Observations, there's sort of these observations out at sea, that's a different kind of information. 2 different kinds. It'd be great if NOAA can try to start to merge those, but not at the expense of science. Not at the expense of people who say, here's what we think is going on with this population, and then making deliberate decisions, which is what the Magnuson Act requires. It does not require saying the major goal is longevity of the fishing industry. We have to balance both because the society wants the fish to continue and the ecosystem to continue, not just fishermen. I want fishermen to continue. I want these wonderful communities to continue. But it's not just fish and men in a room talking about who should win. So that's my view. And I think be careful about the ecological engineering, about let's just remove a lot of dogfish to resolve the problem we made by removing all the cod in the first place and bottom fish. So I really hesitate about saying, no, you should go ahead and do a whole lot of engineering like that. And then I do have, and then I'll probably be in touch with your office, is what I think.
Good. Yes.
Yes. Good morning.
Morning.
Patrick Murray, Narragansett. This is to our federal delegation. Sorry to see Cicilline, Representative Langevin not here today. My question is, a little background here. I used to commercial fish 30 years ago. And over the last 30 years, I've watched the Rhode Island DEM and the federal government, through regulation and state mandates, systematically destroy the commercial fishermen industry in Rhode Island. My question is to our 2 senators, is why is it the only time we see your faces is during the election cycle?
Yep. Good question.
Well, just to answer for myself, this is a bigger crowd than we usually get, but I've been out on Tina's boat. I've been out with Captain Rule. I've been down here, I don't know, 8 or 10 times since I've been elected. So I appreciate that this is an election season. I appreciate that there are so many people here. I've got 2 people on my staff full-time on this issue, Anna Marie Laura out of the Washington office, and Nick Vincelet. Actually, Nick's not full-time on this issue, but he covers this issue and 1 or 2 others. And so I guess I would not agree with your premise.
Thank you.
And I try to be here anytime, you know, you want. Nick is down here, Anna Marie's in touch, so I hope we've been, you know, attentive. We certainly have tried.
I appreciate your service.
We certainly have tried.
Well, I've had Steve Keenan, who's here today, working, I think, with a lot of people individually. Steve's right over here, on a constant basis. I worked with John in the 90s when we had the first effort to help support the industry with the buyback program and several other programs, which has provided opportunities to, you know, keep the industry going. And I was here just about 3 months ago, Fred, when we were on the ship touring, looking at some of the successful activities.
Yeah.
Then I was with
the NEMA.
yeah, and then we were down at we announced we took off the Cox's Ledge as far as the wind farms. So we try to be involved in all these issues, and I think the reason we're here today, and for me this is not an election cycle, the reason we're here today is because what John has said, what we all recognize. First, extraordinarily complicated problems. I mean, Chris's points about the interaction between different species. We only manage one species. We have institutional shortcomings. We have scientific shortcomings. Is that we have to maintain this dialogue between the fishing community, the regulators, and the delegation to get anything done. And that's the whole purpose of today. But the other point that we want to stress, I want to stress, is, and it goes to, you know, being here not just once every several years, but, you know, as often as we can get by here, and having staff devoted on a daily basis, is that this is not just a one-shot meeting. You know, we fully expect, I fully expect, that after we've gone and digested all the points you've made, John will be back, Dr. Carr will be back, we'll be back, and we'll have to have answers to you. And guess what? We'll have more questions. Because that's kind of the nature of this process.
I want to thank you for your service, Senator, but the regulation and the mandate, I don't know if there's going to be an industry for you to come back to.
Well, you know, we had a crisis in the 90s that was really severe. We were able to get some additional time. That's what we were able to do. We're right back here, and the only way we're going to solve this is working together. This is not going to be something that's just going to naturally occur. You know, the species will come back, etc. This is going to require listening, and that's what we're doing today, and then coming back and having a principled discussion about, you know, you've made a great point, we're going to do it. Or here's a reason that, for scientific reasons or other reasons, it doesn't sort of pan out. And that's the whole process, and we'll be back constantly.
I want to thank you for your service, Senator.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Skip Raycheck, vessel owner and Catman 80-foot stern dragger. I wanted to talk about the science just for a second. Yeah. And I think, first of all, I want to say you guys are walking into a mess. This is a mess. And not using 4-letter words, it's a freaking mess. And the mess is that there's absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, and I think a lot of people probably agree with me, there's no confidence at all that anything we're saying or anything we do is going to go anywhere that has any effect on what we're going through. Okay, I lost a great deal of money in the last few years, a great deal. I'm 68 years old. I'm upside down on my boat mortgage. My 1040s last year declared minus $470,000. Now, that's a lost carryover, but it's from the last few years. All right? I have to say the facts because I want you to see the face on the effects of what the science, for instance, is doing. At the May yellowtail flounder meeting in New Bedford, it came out very clear that the draconian limits on flounder coming up are based on data that, as Tina said, that comes from using a rock hopper sweep, which is for rocks. It's for rocks on George's Bank on flat bottom to catch flat fish. It does not work. Especially when you tow it at 4 knots, the way the Bigelow does. I was at a flounder meeting, and it came up. We asked the scientists. This is a couple of years ago now. We asked the scientists how fast are you towing that net for the blackback flounder, and she said, 3.754 knots. You can't catch flounder anything over 2.5 knots. Anybody that knows gear, anybody that's been fishing knows that. My peeve with the science is, it came out at that meeting in New Bedford that a single species, yellowtail flounder, was extremely important to ground fish and extremely important, as you probably know, to the scallop industry as bycatch. It came out that the data being used to form the regulations comes from using the wrong net, probably at the wrong speed, probably in the wrong place at the wrong time, but we'll leave that. But just using the wrong net with the wrong sweep to catch these fish, number one. When I think it was Russ Brown was asked, well, why did you use a rock hopper sweep to catch yellowtail flounder? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work. He said, well, we don't have the money, we don't have the funds. We have to do a sample of the entire ecosystem, which is a joke to begin with. You can't do that. Everybody knows that. But the point is this. I pick up a paper and I read that Sam Roush or Jim Balsinger is saying that we can't supply, that the wild-caught fishery can't supply fish, the demand for fish. So they're putting money into aquaculture. NOAA is putting money into aquaculture. Sam Roush just did an interview with Fish News EU, the European Union Fish News, and he said that as fisheries we're responsible for bolstering aquaculture. Now, if there's money that NOAA has for aquaculture, but there's not money to do a single species survey with the correct net on a fish that's so vital to New England as yellowtail flounder, something's really wrong with that. Something is really, really wrong with that. We need some respect. You know, the bumper sticker is respect the people that feed you. Respect us. Respect our fishery. You know, we're wild-caught fishery now. We're some kind of a boutique thing. There's a great deal of food that comes out of this port, and there's a great deal of fish out there. And by the way, throw out that whole idea that there are too few fish being chased by too many fishermen. That ain't true. It hasn't, I don't think it's ever been true, but I know it's not true now. You can throw that out. That's garbage. This whole crisis mentality management is garbage. We're getting killed by this. A lot of people, look around you. How many people are fishermen in this room? A lot of people are making a lot of money off of this. And it's not us. We just need to be able to go back to work. We don't want to bail out. We don't want to buy out. We just want to go back to work. There's plenty of fish. There's good boats, and there's good fishermen. And you're right, John. Fishermen are smart. They're smart in so many different ways. And the fact of the matter is that we get very disheartened when we hear that, oh, NOAA is funding aquaculture, research, and startups, but there isn't enough money to do a single species survey. I have to take data from a multi-species survey with a net that doesn't work for anything, probably. Now that's really what gets very disheartening about this whole thing. And we're so far beyond taking notes and going back to Washington. We're hanging by our fingertips. I have my whole life savings wrapped up in this thing, and I can't get out if I wanted to. So I'm sorry about my energy at you, John. I know you just came on the scene, But we're so far beyond this. Do you know how many of these I've been to, how many times, how many papers I've written, how many things I've said? It just doesn't go anywhere. And then we still get we still get the draconian regulations based on garbage science. Like Jimmy Rule says, garbage in, garbage out. If you have to take some of that money you're putting into aquaculture, sir, and put it into cooperative research. Get your good scientists to go out on some of the good fishing boats and some of the good fishermen here, and you'll get some good data. And that way, we can get some regulations that actually work. Sorry, I went on too long. Thank you.
I think I made so many great points. But the one is that you have to have confidence that at least what you said is heard and is responded to. Now, you might not agree with the response, but if you don't have the sense of confidence that you're being able to communicate effectively, then nothing's going to get done. And that's, again, one of the major reasons John's here, Dr. Cox here, we're here, and we'll be back again, is because we want this dialogue so that people feel at least they're being heard. But thanks. I don't think I could have described the dilemma that this community faces any better than you did. So thank you. And I'm going to work on it.
Bill, do you want to say something?
If I could, just very quickly. It's obviously very, very important for me to hear where you're coming from and where everyone in this room is coming from. My paycheck doesn't depend on the data that I collect and the information that I provide. Yours does. So we bear a very heavy responsibility in terms of the quality of our science, in terms of the understanding of the science that we move forward. And we have a great responsibility to listen and to pay attention to what it is that you're saying. If I've heard concern, the most serious concern that I have heard over the time that I've been here in the Northeast is relative to the surveys and the way that the surveys inform the stock assessments. What I'm going to ask from everybody in this room is that you give us the opportunity to sit down and to better explain to you what it is that we are doing and how the information flow supports the stock assessment. And through that process to listen better to where you're coming from. One thing that we are going to do within the next year is begin some side-by-side trawling, some comparative work between the Bigelow and a commercial vessel, looking towards possible additional survey activity. The availability of funds is an issue that's at a higher level than mine relative to whether we do aquaculture or surveys. But certainly a dedicated flatfish survey would better inform the assessment of flatfish than a multi-species survey, which is the kind of survey that we're doing now. So we have some dialogue. I do hear these concerns, and I do understand the importance of responding to them. I can't do that in a short meeting now, but we will engage and we will work with you on this and the other issues that you have.
We need to sit down at a table and hash this stuff out, face to face, is what we need to do. We can get somewhere with that, maybe.
We will.
But I think there's also, one of the points you made, is yellowtail is absolutely critical as a species because of what it affects.
Can I ask a federal delegation something before they leave, just real quick?
Yeah, they've agreed to stay another 10 minutes. Can you?
Sure.
Right, so 10 minutes. So let me go to Fred and, yeah.
I agree with all the comments. Some of the things Tina said, Chris, Dick, exactly. I think science, and we've had these conversations in the last 6 months with Bill, there are some flaws, there are things that we need to improve, and there's no doubt that collaboration, you have an industry here that's willing to go out and work with you. And we need to do that to build this trust back up. That is one of the things. There is such a lack of trust. So even as we improve the science, the point I want to make, and I want to make it to our delegates here, is that we are still stymied and you're handcuffed by the Magnuson and Sustainable Fisheries Act. And Senator Schumer has a bill out now so that we can go back in and maybe look at reauthorizing the Magnuson. And if we don't build some flexibility into this, everything's again for naught. We have been stymied for the last 20 years by this Magnuson, especially overfishing definitions and rebuilding schedules. I mean, it's been our nemesis. And if we don't turn that around and change that language, all of this, again, is going to come back and we'll still just get pittance of fish. We can change it to the ecosystem, we can do whatever. People are right here, that this can't continue like this if we don't address that issue. Then, once we address that issue, now the next thing is for this council and management to react quickly. When we see changes, it's 2 and 3 years. That's why this industry is always in an uproar. We live it, you just said it. We're the eyes, we're out there. It's real time. You need to start to manage considering real time. And lastly, because of this port itself, short-lived species has to be looked at and managed totally different. To shut this squid fishery down this July was just ridiculous. Took millions of dollars. These guys had a difficult winter. That spring was a real boom for them, and then all of a sudden we shut it down. Now, I can see if it's a species that lives 4, 5, 6 years, and it's the spawning stock biomass that you're concerned about for the future. But they only live a few more months. So we didn't save squid for anything other than for crabs and lobsters to eat once they died. We need to change that, and we also need to change looking at how fast we assess other stocks.
Thanks, Fred. Bonnie, and then
Thank you. What I'd like to, this is Bonnie Spinazzola from Atlantic Offshore Lobstermen's Association. What I'd like to say is something that we've all been doing is we're talking about fish, and obviously we need to talk about fish, but nobody talks about lobster. And you do have a federal lobster fishery in federal waters. We're only in federal waters. The ASMFC process is working. However, it's important for you to realize we have absolutely no representation whatsoever. NMFS goes to the ASMFC meetings and represents the agency. The states go to the ASMFC meeting and represent the states. And basically, David Spencer and I represent the offshore fishery. And we go to all of the meetings in DC or wherever they happen to be. The other thing is that there are more and more fish being landed from the offshore fishery and from the federal waters, and that's important for you to realize. And there has been no focus whatsoever on lobster. And we really need to start getting some, because especially in the offshore, and I'll speak just to that, we have absolutely no data. And as far as what everybody else here is talking about, the Bigelow, they do a trawl survey. Well, that's not how you catch lobsters. And that's the only data we have. Atlantic Offshore has been collecting data, biological data, and we have hundreds of thousands of lobsters. And we finally have talked to ASMFC and asked them just to look at our data if they have questions when they're doing the stock assessment. The last stock assessment came out, and the information was extrapolated from 3 miles to the beach for the offshore fishery, which is 30 to 200 miles out. The offshore is a willing, and I think inshore too, we're a willing group of industry people that want to have a study fleet. We want to work with NMFS. We want to learn, what do you want to collect? How do you want us to collect it? We will collect it. Atlantic Offshore has been spending a fortune, and we're not in a position to do this, for our own observers to go out there, because we've been finding juveniles this big, and scientists have said, oh, you can't have juveniles that big because they can't survive, there's not enough light, et cetera, et cetera. We're finding them coming up on the outside of traps holding on. So we are paying for our own observers to go out there and look at these things. I'm trying to think what else. Hold on for 1 second. We would like to, we've reduced our own traps by 50%, or we're getting to 50%. We've gone down to 33% right now. We have another reduction, as the inshore does, planned for the next 5 years. This is an industry-funded buyout, because really we couldn't depend on it from the federal government. A lot of money has gone to groundfish, and they deserve it. They need it. We're not in a position to be as desperate as they are, but that doesn't mean that we don't need good data to keep our fishery working. There are some places, as southern New England, that's not in the best of shape for many reasons. but we need to put money and science into it to figure out why. And offshore, we've been working since 1998, I know when I came in, to push forward regulations. Everybody kind of laughed at us because they said there wasn't an addendum that we didn't like because we had so many regulations, putting them in place for ourselves. And finally, you know, we're waiting actually for NIPS to pass transferability, and we've had it in since 2004. That's ridiculous, just crazy. The other thing too is that we feel that probably the lobster shop is overburdened at the regional office. 2 people can't handle this. And, you know, we can't have a lobster shop dealing with shrimp and squid and everything else. We need to get our focus in the right place. We need to kind of reevaluate everything, the science, the regional office, and we need to make this work because now more than ever, you have an industry that's willing to work with you.
You had some questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what the U.S. fishermen and the people in this room, where is our place in Agenda 21 that is being pushed? You guys know what Agenda 21 is? I know you do. You guys don't know about Agenda 21. You're on the record stating you've never heard of it and don't know anything about it?
You're talking about what you're talking about.
Agenda 21, we're trying to put all the natural resources in the hands of the government or the UN to control and slowly putting everything into the state. We've, Google it. I've actually had guys from Massachusetts come down and speak at our groups that work for the state telling us how it's coming into the communities, how they're doing it, how they're funding it. This document's been out since the 50s. And we can see it happening over and over. And like a lot of these guys said, everything's a crisis. We rule this country by crisis. You try to keep everybody scared so that you can push them around into corners and take their freedoms and liberties away little by little. And the same thing happens in the fishing industry. We've lost 65% of our fleet since 1990. All these predators are out there, and we manage under the system through Magnuson that everything has to be at 100% at the same time, which is biologically impossible. Whether there was one guy fishing in this ocean or not, it can never happen. So right there, we're already wrong, and we're already in a crisis, according to everybody, because the ecosystem works in a circle. Predator-prey relationships change as things change. But if we try to manage everything, that everything can be up here at the same time, which has never happened, we're never going to get anywhere. We had flexibility where if one stock got low, we could switch to another stock. But then they came up with this 10-year time frame history. We took a snapshot and said, okay, if you caught this in that 10 years, that's all you're allowed to catch going forward. Those stocks dwindle, other stocks become abundant, and we're not allowed to go participate in them because we're locked in this 10-year box. So I would like to know what is going to change, because I really don't believe any of it's going to change, because I know where the country's going and I know where everything else is going. The big push for the state to control everything.
Well, first, I think the best approach is pragmatically doing what we can do right now. And it begins with a constructive dialogue to build confidence and to have a real exchange. 2, there are things within the purview of the existing regulations and existing laws that Dr. Karp's division can, and John can do, that is not going to, be very blunt, is not going to automatically turn the situation around, but it's going to make some progress. It's going to provide some assistance. And then I think the point that's come out very clearly is that we have to look at the Magnuson Act in terms of, is that the best way to manage fisheries at this moment? What changes can we make there? That is going to be, to be honest, that's going to be a longer term. That's not going to happen next week, next month.
With all due respect,
that's what I think we
Senator,
have to do.
we were in Washington 2 different times in the last 3.5 years. And none of our Rhode Island delegation even came out to address us. And you guys were in Washington at the time. And you didn't even show up and speak for us. A lot of other congressmen and senators from around the country did, some that were landlocked. But where were you guys? Missing in action. So how can we have any confidence in you when you can't even show up when there's 5,000 people out there rallying?
We're here today. We invited the Rhode Island fishermen in who were there that day.
Yeah, well,
I think we've been.
and like this guy said, in a couple more years, you guys come back here, there's going to be 3 people in the room.
No, but listen, we're here today, which I think makes a lot more sense, because addressing, you know, with all due respect, 5,000 people is, you know, we're here listening, and sometimes that's a lot more important than giving a rhetorical blast. Two, we're going to be back.
Have you guys signed on to any of these bills that have been put forth by Mr. Schumer and these other ones, the change Magnuson and the flexibility?
There are 3 pieces of legislation I'm aware of. One is Senator Kerry has got a bill about the emergency disaster relief that he's trying to draft at the moment, and we're working with him. Senator Schumer has a bill. He and his colleague, Senator Gillibrand, have sent letters also with respect to the emergency relief. So looking at sort of, and I'll let Sheldon speak with Mike, the first thing we want to do is try to deal with this potential request for disaster relief. Then the second issue is really longer term. It's this Magnuson reform, which we're looking at the Sherman bill.
Can I state one thing? I know money's tight and everyone's got their hand out. The fishermen don't need disaster money. What we need is government to get out of the way and let us fish. There's plenty of fish. Like Chris said, if we got to go catch dogfish, we'll go catch dogfish. But the problem is government, not the solution. The agency gets bigger, they build bigger boats, and all this money and the problem is, at the end of the week, whether they make a good decision or a bad decision, they still get their check and they go home and they have their weekends off. Well, we're out there toiling, trying to pay our bills and our health care and everything else. And there's no accountability. Maybe if we made the people at NIMS their paychecks reflective on how well the fleet's doing, things would change very quickly.
Accountability? Well, accountability is
Yeah, that's a good word.
Today, here, is you've got the person in charge and the chief scientist here, listening directly to what you're saying, but not just listening and going away, coming back and getting a dialogue that's going to be constructive, productive, we hope, and that's what we wanted to encourage today.
You can see our skepticism after the IG comes out with a report about all the abuse in the enforcement, and not one person even got reprimanded, never mind fired or went to jail, and they've destroyed people's lives. There is no accountability in government. That's why we're here angry, because there's no accountability.
Well, that's why we're here, because we're listening to your sincere, thoughtful...
Yeah, it's been going on for a long time.
Let me just put that into context for one moment. I've been in the delegation now for 5 years. Every time I've come here, I've heard the same thing, and I've translated it back to NOAA, saying, you guys, you know, have got to start paying attention, because the fishermen are not being listened to, and when I talk to them, what they're saying makes common sense, and it's got to change. And so, and that went all the way to the very top, to the administrator.
Right.
And now we have 2 new people here, right? And they're 2 new people who have a very good record at working with the fishermen. Bill Karp's record, and one of the reasons we like him being here, is because he paid attention in Alaska. And that's the record we got when we looked into it. John was the mayor of New Bedford. He had a great way of making sure that the fishermen got listened to. So now we have the head Northeast Regional Administrator, who is somebody who we think now will listen. We have the head Northeast Scientist, brand new also, who we think now will listen. We're having this opening session to make sure that they are exposed to your concerns. And now that we have people we believe will listen, we are going to make sure that some of these changes get made, because this is, frankly, common sense.
I got no doubt that these 2 guys will do a great job.
So, and we're going to be on them, and we're going to try to work together.
The problem is all the way up to Jane Lachenko in the Obama administration. Until that changes, these guys aren't going to be able to do anything.
They'll be fine.
But yet, we got criminals that are still working for NOAA. People that should be in jail.
We will work with them to make sure they're working.
That's why we're here today with them.
This man's had his hand up line then.
Yes, my name's Harold Loftes, and I probably, without a doubt, am the oldest fisherman in this room. I've been here for over 50 years.
Harold, that sounds like a fisherman.
I've always been successful. It's got to the point now where I've lost total faith in everything. Let's fast forward just for a second. 10, 20 years. You're standing in somebody's living room right now. That's the way things are going. One of the things that happened was catch shares. catch shares are bought up by all the big players. The little guys like him, me, him, have nothing. We don't have a half a chance. Now, there is a solution to all of this, I believe.
What is it?
Now, we start off right up at the very top. It's going to be election time. Half the incumbents in the country have got to go. As we come down the line, right in this state, our senators have done very little for us. If we had Scott Brown from Massachusetts sitting here, I would be delighted. He's a man that has really stood up for us and backed up with what he said, with action. I talked to Senator Reed 3.5 years ago, told him my problem. He looked me right in the eye and he said, we've got to do something about this. Nothing. This has been going on for years. If things don't change, you are standing in somebody's living room. That's the way it's going to be. I've watched this fleet go downhill, and it's got worse and worse. And when catch shares came in, it's like it went into super speed, and it's just about all over now. It's got to change. Catch shares has got to be eliminated because the small fishermen will not survive. There are very few left now. You go to New Bedford, Carlos owns, what, 30, 40 permits? They've gobbled up everything that was of any value. And if it was all the greedy people, and we have some in this fleet that are in favor of catch shares, that if you want to listen to that 10 or 20%, you'll hear a totally different story. It's great because they're getting something out of it. The rest of us are getting nothing. So that's something that's got to happen. Now, I know you've got a good reputation and probably your intentions are honorable, but I think Jane Lubchenco is running the whole show. And if she goes, they cut them strings and you stop being a puppet, then maybe something will happen. That's my big hope.
Let me tell you, on July 14th, I was on a sailboat with my wife about a half a mile from here on vacation and having a great time. I was retired. And when people said, and I was contemplating being retired, and it was a wonderful thing to contemplate being retired with my wife. I'd run a school for 10 years, and I was thinking about retirement with my wife. And, Dick Allen, who I thought was a friend of mine from Rhode Island, had said, you should run the National Marine Fisheries Service Northeast office. And I thought about it. And then other people, Barney Frank, who you guys know, said, John, you should run the National Marine. People I thought were my friends, said,
you are in the hot seat, sir.
Said you should run the National Marine Fisheries. I thought these people were my friends. And so I looked at the situation, and who said it was a mess? That is a 4-letter word, by the way. It is a mess. And I said, it's a mess. And when I told people I was interested in it, the first question they all asked was, are you crazy? And one guy I worked with in the 90s, Terry Garcia, said, think pinata, John, think pinata. That's what the job description is, pinata. And so it is, pinata. And it's a mess. Jane Lubchenco hired me to do a job. She didn't tell me how to do it. She didn't give me one order, not Agenda 21, no orders. She said, you're hired to go fix the situation. She said, go fix the situation. All right?
She's been running the show.
She just said, go fix the situation. All right?
Put it out of business.
Hey, Days at Sea was a real You know, that worked well, didn't it?
Way better. Way better.
Yeah, 18 days to go fish. That was working real well.
That's science.
Yeah, I know. I've heard it all. It was a
We need to go
mess.
back to days.
It was a mess. You know, in the 90s, Amendment 5 was the death knell. Everyone was going out of business in the 90s with Amendment 5. Amendment 7, everyone was going out of business with Amendment 7. You know, I've heard this movie before. Everyone's going out of business. Now, believe me, I understand what you said. I said it, you know, about a half an hour, 45 minutes ago. I don't want to be in somebody's living room right here, you know, or in other fish processing plants or superior trawls, you know, turned condominiums. That's why I came out of retirement, and I'm not with my wife right now enjoying retirement, because I don't want to be in somebody's living room on a dock that should be supporting a fishing industry. That's why it is Fish and Fishermen, right? Because I want to give everything I've got to keep it that way, all right? We're going to win this battle because we got good people on the Hill who are here today and tomorrow and the next day, because we're going to use every tool in the book, the Magnuson Act and every other tool we've got to win this battle, because this kind of business here, the boats out on the dock, feeding people fresh fish, is a lot more important than one more damn living room.
What is your opinion of catch shares?
I think catch shares, I'm agnostic about catch shares, all right? I'll tell you what I have an opinion on, and it'll probably get me in hot water. I am against anybody owning, you know, one or two people owning the New England fishing industry. I don't think that's what anybody intended, okay?
But that's what's happening.
I know that's what's happening, and I don't think anybody took a vote on that.
The government
okay?
takeover.
I don't think anybody took a vote on that. I think that's what Amendment 18. I'm just on the job a month, for Pete's sake, all right? I don't think anybody took a vote on that. I don't think people have been paying enough attention to that part of it. I think the New England Council has got to say, hey, let's get Amendment 18 back on the front burner where it belongs.
They rigged the New England Council to the point where they had no choice.
People have choices, okay? I row. Before I took this job, I row in New Bedford Harbor 3 times a week. It looks like the same port. You know, there's 500 boats in New Bedford Harbor. When you row on the New Bedford side, it looks the same, except all the boats are green and they all have CR painted on the bow. So, you know, if you're paying attention, it doesn't look exactly the same, right? I don't think that's the way the New England fishery is intended to be. 4 or 5 people 10 years from now owning the whole fleet. I don't think that's what is.
It's almost too late now.
Well, I'm not giving up on that, all right? I'm not giving up on that. So, but that's an issue, consolidation, excessive capacity, and NOAA said when they passed catch shares, you're not supposed to have, that's, what is it, standard 4? You're not supposed to have excessive capacity. So it would have been nice to do that up front, but you're not supposed to have that, and we said that when catch shares went through. So we've got to attend to that. That is unfinished business. That is unfinished business. We have to attend to that.
With all due respect, if Ms. Lachenko was ready, wanted to solve this problem, she would have put Dr. Brian Rothschild in your spot.
Already given us more time.
Here's the point. We have to, Lizzie's been excellent comments about issues that are extremely complicated. We've got to get together and staff, we're going to staff, and Dr. Carr and John. First of all, I think this guy is going to be a great breath of fresh air leader, breath of fresh air. And Dr. Carr's reputation precedes him in the last one. We're going to get a list of the critical issues, the proposals, etc., and then reconvene. You know, not, you know, promptly, but with enough research done and work done by these gentlemen and everybody else, so that we can have real answers and real responses back to what was brought up here today. But I think this has been extremely useful, because it's been uninhibited, it's been frank, it's been civil, and I think this is the way that we should operate. And we've got to do more and more of it, because the problem's not getting better, it's getting worse. So I want to thank everyone, particularly the comments that were not only heartfelt, but very thoughtful and very candid and right, direct, no political. Yes, you have.
Yeah, I just want to say, from the offshore lobster perspective, both senators have been great. Your offices have been unbelievably helpful, and we've probably pestered you to death, but you've been great. And I know that you've sort of heard otherwise, but I know that I can't say enough good things about you, so thank you.
It's still everybody's too busy fishing to come to these meetings. We have
work to do.
Okay?
Thank you.
We haven't gotten everywhere. We're going to take notes. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to get back to lobsters real quick. The biggest problem we have in southern New England.
Give me your name.
Danny Dellinger, president of Rhode Island Lobster.
Danny Dellinger.
We don't have any data being generated.
We don't have any
data to put in to do these stock assessments.
Yeah.
There was very little data, basically, essentially on the beach that's done by the states. Now, the state's funding has been cut, so that we don't even have that anymore.
Yeah.
There is none that happens on the federal waters, essentially, or very near shore, the ones that do happen. So, industry is, we've met with our state leaders at times, offering our assistance to help generate this data. Collaborative research is what's going to be needed. There's vast areas of southern New England that nobody even takes a look at. You get this one trawl survey that you do at the Bigelow, and we're going to extrapolate the little bit of information that's generated, shoreside, all the way